They gave me 10 minutes to stop being their son. 10 minutes to pack up 17 years of my life because my girlfriend was pregnant and I was just a kid in 10th grade who made one mistake. I still remember the way my dad flipped our family photo face down like he was burying me alive without a funeral. My mom stood there arms crossed watching me drag a suitcase across the marble floor she once said I'd inherit. That night I slept under a streetlight instead of a roof. 20 years later, those same parents walked into my son's hospital lobby, holding designer gifts and fake smiles, calling him their grandson. But what they saw next wasn't the boy they abandoned. It was the man their cruelty created. My name is Daxon Rowe, and this is what happened when karma finally came home. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. And if my story touches you, if you've ever felt thrown away but fought your way back, please subscribe. Every story like mine reminds the world that second chances aren't given, they're earned. My name is Daxon Rowe, and the night I stopped being someone's son began with rain tapping against the glass like a countdown I couldn't stop. Charleston smelled like wet wood and wax polish that evening, the kind that clings to memory long after you've left a place. The chandelier over our marble foyer burned too bright, the crystals scattering light across the room like 1,000 eyes watching me crumble. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the third pregnancy test onto the marble floor. "It's positive," I said, my voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Camille, my mother, didn't even flinch. She just crossed her arms, her diamond bracelets catching the light. "No daughter-in-law of mine," she whispered, "and no bastard grandchild either." My father, Reginald Rowe, CEO of Rowe Maritime, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He turned toward the clock above the mantel, the old pendulum swaying like judgment. "You have 10 minutes, he said flatly. "Take what fits. Leave your keys on the table." I stared at him, trying to find a face I recognized under the marble mask he wore. "Dad, please." I started, but his hand was already on the family photo that hung above the fireplace. He flipped it face down. The scrape of the frame against stone sounded like a verdict. Camille tilted her head as though the act were tedious housekeeping. I wanted to scream that Kira didn't ruin anything, that I loved her, that I'd take care of the baby, but their silence was a wall. My father disappeared upstairs and returned moments later carrying a small leather suitcase, the one they'd bought for my college tours. He set it down by the front door with clinical precision, then adjusted his Yale ring. 10 minutes, he repeated, checking his watch like he was timing a board meeting. My throat burned. I remember staring at my reflection in the glass of the grandfather clock, my face warped by its curve. Somewhere behind me, the maid hovered in the hallway, frozen between duty and pity. Camille finally spoke. "You'll thank us one day," she said, as if exile were a lesson in gratitude. I packed blindly, one hoodie, a notebook, the pen my father had engraved with my initials DR. I left the trophies, the framed certificates, the life that was supposed to mean something. When the front door closed behind me, the click of the lock was louder than thunder. Rain soaked me before I reached the gate. The house glowed behind me, white columns gleaming like teeth. I thought of the portrait lying face down on the mantel, of my father's perfect tie knot, of my mother's cold perfume. 10 minutes. That's all the time it took to erase me. I walked down King Street toward the river, the suitcase bumping against my knee, water seeping through my sneakers. Somewhere in that darkness, something broke, and something else, something fierce, began to take shape. A thought I didn't yet have words for. If I ever saw them again, I wouldn't beg to stay. They'd be the ones asking. I woke to the sound of footsteps, and a voice soft as the rain had been harsh. "Child, you'll freeze to death out here." For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Dawn in Charleston was gray and damp, and I was curled beneath the gazebo in Madison Square, my suitcase serving as a pillow. The woman standing over me wore a long cashmere coat. Her silver hair swept neatly back, a small white poodle at her feet. I pushed myself upright, embarrassed by the state I was in. "I'm fine," I lied through chattering teeth. "No, you're not," she said simply. Her eyes studied me the way a mother studies a fever. "How old are you?" 16. And where's home? I didn't answer. She sighed, the kind of sound that carried both weariness and decision. Then come with me. Pierre and I hate eating breakfast alone. Her name was Aurelia Montrose. The car smelled like lavender and leather. The heated seats felt like mercy. When she drove us through Bay Street, the city still slept, the lamplight turning wet cobblestones gold. Her house, Montrose House, sat on a corner lot wrapped in magnolias, a grand old building that looked like it had been waiting for someone. I lost my daughter, she said as she unlocked the door. 5 years ago. Her name was Livia. She led me upstairs to a room that seemed frozen in that loss, a crib assembled in the corner, a closet filled with maternity clothes still tagged. I stared at them, unsure whether to feel comforted or haunted. Aurelia rested a hand on my shoulder. This is yours now, she said. No questions, no conditions. Everyone deserves a second chance. The first breakfast I had there felt unreal: scrambled eggs, toast, hot tea. The silver clinked against porcelain, a sound so ordinary it made me ache. Pierre sat at my feet, his tail brushing my ankle like a heartbeat. You'll stay, Aurelia said, as if it were already decided. You'll finish school. You'll work when you can. I'll handle the rest. I wanted to protest, to tell her I didn't deserve it, but the words stuck in my throat. She only smiled. Gratitude will do, dear, not guilt. Later, she showed me around the house, the study lined with cookbooks and framed menus from her restaurants, the hallway of family photos that ended with one picture of Livia Young, bright-eyed, her hands resting on her rounded belly. She would have had a boy, Aurelia murmured. She loved stars. That's why the nursery ceiling is painted with constellations. That night, lying beneath those painted stars, I thought of Kira and the baby she carried. I thought of my parents' house, its windows still glowing, and wondered if they even remembered me. Before turning off the light, Aurelia lingered at the doorway. From the day Livia died, she said softly, I kept this room ready. I never knew for whom until now. She closed the door gently, and for the first time in 3 days I slept without fear of the morning. When I woke, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Pierre lay curled at my feet like a guardian. Downstairs, I heard dishes, the faint hum of a radio. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the crib in the corner, the blank page of my notebook, and the pen engraved, DR. Still mine. Still here. I wasn't ready to call Montrose House home, but as I looked around, I realized it was the first place that hadn't asked me to leave. Standing before Livia's portrait later that day, I whispered a promise to the girl in the picture, to the woman who'd saved me, to the child not yet born. I won't run again. Outside, the air smelled of magnolia and salt. Inside, Pierre slept under the crib. The past still echoed, but for the first time its voice was fading. The kitchen at the docklight was its own kind of storm metal, clanging steam, rising the rhythm of knives on cutting boards like a drumbeat that never stopped. I started at the bottom, scrubbing pans and stacking dishes until my arms ached. Aurelia insisted I learn every station before touching the register. You want to build something real, Dax, she said, wiping flour from her hands. You learn it from the floor up. So I did. By day I cleaned grease traps and carried crates of produce. By night I studied online for my GED with the same pen my father had engraved years ago. Its metal body now scratched the letters DR, still visible under the light. That pen was proof I existed before they erased me. Aurelia ran her restaurant empire like a quiet orchestra. Every sound had meaning, the hiss of sauce, the ticking of timers, the soft scratch of her pencil as she balanced profit margins in the ledger. Money is memory, she told me once. Keep track of where it goes and you'll know who's loyal. She showed me how to read invoices, calculate waste, and track labor costs. I never understood how grace and discipline could fit inside the same person until I saw her turn failure into ritual. One night while closing the restaurant, I met Talon Pierce. He was there to update Aurelia's will. He looked too young to be a lawyer, his sleeves rolled hair falling slightly over his brow. When Aurelia went upstairs to fetch documents, he lingered near the counter where I was tallying receipts. You're her apprentice, he asked. Something like that, I said. She saved my life. He nodded, scanning the ledger I'd been working on. You're good with numbers? He said, then added softly. Good thing. Numbers never lie. We talked for an hour about school online courses and the kind of freedom that comes with a diploma. He didn't pry. He didn't pity me. That silence of understanding was more comforting than any sermon. Winter came heavy that year. Kira was 8 months pregnant and still working part-time at a diner near the docks. The night the storm hit the city froze under sleet. I was finishing my shift when Aurelia called. "She's in labor," she said. "Meet us at St. Boniface." I remember running through streets that shimmered with ice, my breath slicing the air. When I burst into the hospital, Kira's face was pale, her hair damp with sweat. Aurelia held her hand, whispering something about strength being louder than pain. 18 hours passed in flashes, machines beeping, nurses calling out times, the metallic smell of antiseptic mixing with rain. At dawn, when the storm quieted, a cry broke through the room, raw and perfect. Kira looked at me with eyes half closed and said, "His name's Zephyrin." I nodded, unable to speak. Aurelia cut the umbilical cord herself when Kira asked her to. It was like watching a circle close, one woman giving life, another giving back what life had taken. We registered him as Zephyrin Bellamy Rowe. I signed the papers with shaking hands, the pen pressing too hard against the form. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals. Aurelia touched my shoulder. "You're a father now," she said. "Don't let fear make you small." Back at the docklight, I took night shifts again. I'd rock Zephyrin to sleep in the mornings before class and cradle textbooks beside his crib while he dreamed. The kitchen became my second home, the heat and noise a reminder that survival had a sound. The tattered apron I wore carried stains of tomato sauce oil and sweat proof that I was building something with my hands. Aurelia's will kept changing every year, adding new names, protections, instructions. She said it was to future-proof love. When Zephyrin was a few weeks old, Talon stopped by with more papers. He handed me a list written in neat legal script. "Keep these documents safe," he said quietly. "Birth certificate, lease, work records, anything that proves continuity. If they ever come back, you'll need evidence." I frowned. "If who comes back?" He hesitated. "Your parents," he said finally. "They didn't just throw you out, Dax. They filed an emancipation order." The words felt unreal. I didn't know then that those papers would one day become my shield. That night, while Zephyrin slept in the crib Aurelia had kept ready for years, I stared at the ceiling painted with constellations and listened to his breathing. Fear and joy twisted together like the weather outside. Aurelia peeked in, whispering, "Sleep now. Tomorrow you cook breakfast." Pierre, the old poodle, curled near my feet. For the first time in months, I wasn't running. I was staying. Time passed in montage, Zephyrin's first steps between the tables of the docklight, my GED certificate taped to the fridge, late-night talks with Talon turning into quiet companionship. We were no longer just survivors. We were a family that built itself from ashes and flour. For 20 years, peace had become routine. The docklight thrived. Aurelia's restaurants spread across Georgia, and Zephyrin grew into the kind of man people wrote articles about. He was 20 now, chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at St. Boniface, a prodigy in scrubs who made miracles look methodical. Life had settled into something, gentle mornings by the river, dinner with Talon, the house echoing with quiet instead of ghosts. Then one evening, while chopping herbs for stew, I heard my own last name on TV. Dr. Zephyrin Bellamy Rowe, the anchor, announced the youngest cardiac innovator in Georgia. The screen filled with his photo, him smiling in surgical blues, the subtitle glowing beneath, "The only son of the prestigious Rowe family." I froze, the knife still in my hand. I hadn't heard that phrase, the Rowe family, in 2 decades. Talon walked in from his office, saw my face, and turned toward the TV just as the next segment played my parents, Reginald and Camille, at some charity gala in Savannah, giving interviews about how proud they were of their brilliant grandson. By morning, the story was everywhere. Social media posts, press releases, photos of my father shaking hands with hospital donors. Then came the package delivered to the hospital, mahogany box, gold ribbon inside a Rolex, a Mont Blanc pen, and a first edition of Grey's Anatomy. The note read, "From your loving grandparents." Zeph brought it home, confusion written all over his face. Dad, should I thank them? He asked. I stared at the watch gleaming under the kitchen light. No one gives gifts out of love, I said, when the last thing they gave you was the door. A few nights later, a reservation appeared at the docklight under the name Alan and Claire Winslow. Something in me already knew. When I walked into the dining room, I saw them immediately, Camille's emerald ring catching the light, Reginald's posture as stiff as his suit. They looked older, but unchanged in essence, polished like marble, hollow like it too. I approached their table as if they were any customers. Good evening, I said evenly. Can I get you started with something? My father looked up, his expression unreadable. We need to talk about your son, he said. He's your grandson, I replied. And you had your chance 20 years ago. My mother straightened her pearl necklace. We made mistakes. But family is family. Not this one, I said quietly. We only serve food here, not forgiveness. Then I walked away, leaving them sitting in silence beneath the chandelier Aurelia once picked out herself. A week later, Camille went on WSAV Channel 3. Her voice trembled perfectly for the camera. We just want to make amends, she said, dabbing at tears that never fell. We forgive our son. Family always finds its way back. Talon and I watched from the living room. He paused the video and smirked. They forgive you, he said. That's not grace. That's confession. Within days, reporters surrounded St. Boniface. They called Zeph the prodigal heir, speculating on family reconciliations. He came home exhausted, still in scrubs. Dad, he asked, who are they really? I looked at him at the steadiness in his eyes and felt the weight of every secret I'd carried. They're people, I said finally, who chose reputation over love. He nodded slowly, not pressing further. But that silence between us was heavy, charged with questions he would someday demand answers to. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside blending with the sound of my heartbeat. The past wasn't just knocking anymore, it was breaking in through the front door. Talon closed his laptop, later turning to me with that calm precision I had come to trust. They just made their biggest mistake, he said. By saying they forgive you, they admitted there's something to be forgiven for. I exhaled, my hands trembling slightly. Then this time I said, we don't run. We fight. He reached across the table and took my hand. Not on their terms, he said. On yours. As the night deepened, I stood by the window watching the river move, slow, steady, unstoppable. The reflection of the city lights shimmered across the water, bending but never breaking. I realized then the battlefield wasn't outside anymore. It was the name I'd tried to bury, the blood that wouldn't stay quiet, the ghosts who'd mistaken forgiveness for ownership. The Rose wanted a legacy. I wanted peace, and only one of us could have both. The call came at 2 a.m., the hour when the city forgets to breathe. I was in the Montrose and Cumber office coffee machine, humming spreadsheets open, when Reginald's name lit my screen. I let it ring until the voicemail clicked. His voice poured out warm as bourbon. I just want to meet my grandson. I deleted it before the sentence finished. An hour later, the morning news ran a soft focus segment, billionaire parents asking for forgiveness, pearl soft lighting. Camille tilted to camera like a repentant saint. I muted the TV and stared at the river through the window until Talon slid a thick folder onto the desk. They just opened the gate, he said. Let's walk through it. He keyed open the Montrose house safe, pulled a sealed envelope, and laid a notarized scan beneath the lamp. The heading had a date burned into me like a brand, 2005. Relinquishment of all parental rights and responsibilities toward Daxon Rowe and any offspring born or unborn. I traced the signatures with my eyes not touching the paper, as if skin might contaminate the truth. Reginald's bold initials. Camille's careful loops. It wasn't memory punishing me anymore. It was ink. My email pinged. Owen Blake. Subject line. We should tell Zeph the truth. I regret everything. I almost laughed. Talon skimmed the headers, tapped a key, and turned the laptop toward me. Sent from a Rowe Maritime internal address, he said. He's not repenting. He's billing. We dug deeper. A buried thread between Owen, Reginald, and Camille. Language dressed in corporate linen about rehabilitation and legacy. Dax's sentimental one-line read, "Lean on family. Offer $5 million and a board seat." There was an attachment labeled Image Restoration Plan, a $500,000 payment to Owen for playing the part of contrite father. It wasn't a reunion they wanted. It was a product launch. I found Zeph asleep on a vinyl couch in the hospital family room, still in scrubs after a 20-hour shift. When I touched his shoulder, he woke instantly, all focus. "Dad," he said. "They sent more gifts." He hesitated. I checked my birth file and records. There's a name under father. He swallowed. Owen Blake. The room felt too small for both of our heartbeats. "Why didn't you tell me I chose the hardest sentence?" "Because they didn't earn you." He held my gaze, hurt, cutting and clear, and then something steadier rose behind it. "Then tell me now," he said. "So I can protect Mom. So I can protect what Grandma Aurelia built." For the first time, he called Aurelia Grandma without stopping to measure it. Back at the house, Talon lined the evidence across the table like a map. The relinquishment, the emails, the payment schedule. "This is more than harassment," he said. "It's a coordinated campaign to trade on your son's name." He opened another file, password protected, stamped with Aurelia's estate crest. The video flickered on Aurelia at her desk in a silk scarf, eyes bright, voice unshakable. "My darling," she said, as if she could see through time if they come back. "Remember, paper is a sword. Justice isn't kindness. Justice is light." The will language beneath the video was spare and lethal. "Any person who abandoned me or mine forfeits all claims, money, property, brand, future benefits." There would be no buying their way into our lives with donations and photo ops. I stepped outside for air. Wind rippled the river, slicing neon into moving ribbons. I thought about that marble foyer, the clock, the suitcase. "They pushed me out in 10 minutes, I said when Talon joined me. "I'll give them 10 minutes to see the truth." He nodded. "We start with the gala," he said. "If they want a stage, we'll give them one with every light turned on." I looked back at the house where Zeph slept and felt fear give way to purpose. Justice wasn't going to knock. I would open the door and walk it in. We watched the second video from Aurelia that afternoon, the room washed in amber from the Tiffany lamp. She was laughing in that soft way she had when she was about to say something sharp. "If they return," she said, "offer them a stage. They will do the rest." Talon paused the frame on her smile and outlined the plan. Savannah Medical Gala. Public audience. Controlled evidence. Every document authenticated and ready. "We're not ambushing," he said. "We're clarifying." I wrote the invitations by hand. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Rowe, please join us for the launch of the Aurelia Montrose Foundation and be recognized for your family's place in our story." For Owen. "Your presence is requested for parentage clarification and to close all remaining questions in the open." Each envelope bore a wax seal, Aurelia's crest pressed into deep red. Alongside the stationery, Talon and I built a portfolio, the original relinquishment with its witness marks, the email chain printed with server headers, the restoration plan detailing payment, and a draft of a restraining order ready for filing. Nothing dramatic, just light. A nurse from St. Boniface called that evening, voice nervous. "Camille approached the foundation office," she said. "She's offering a $12 million donation if we facilitate family access." Talon didn't blink. "Then we facilitate," he told the coordinator calmly. "Please seat them at table 1 in front of the main screen." The nurse exhaled, half scandalized, half relieved. "I can do that." At dinner, Zeph pushed his plate away, restless. "Do we have to take it that far?" he asked. Maybe they really did change. I reached for his hand. "Remorse doesn't start with cameras," I said, "and it doesn't end with a hashtag." He looked down, nodded, and finally said yes to delivering the keynote. He didn't ask what would happen after. He trusted the shape of our silence. Near midnight, my inbox chimed again. Owen had sent a link and a single line. "This is everything." The file was a recorded boardroom video, Reginald at the head of a polished table, Camille at his shoulder, a slide deck behind them, reading the Harrison, then catching himself Roe Legacy Initiative. We reclaim the narrative, Reginald said. Grandson on stage reconciliation photo pre-IPO goodwill. They spoke in the clean grammar of commerce about a human being who had once slept under a streetlight because they told his father to leave. Talon watched it once rewound, and watched again, his lawyer's brain clicking into place. Thank him, he said dryly. Their best piece just became ours. He reached into the safe one last time and drew out a document I hadn't seen before, a narrow envelope with Aurelia's handwriting. It was a final power of attorney contingent on a single condition at the moment Zeph delivered his speech control of $15 million in assets, and the Montrose encumbered holdings would transfer to the Aurelia Foundation for Young Parents with Zeph as executive director. Board structure locked, beneficiary language sealed, challenges pre-answered. No one can hijack what isn't ours anymore, Talon said. It belongs to the mission. I walked the house after midnight the way I used to walk the dining room before service, checking corners, setting the tables of a life. In the nursery that had once held a crib, Pierre's old bed still sat under the window. I heard Aurelia's voice in the quiet, keep your ledger straight. In the hall, I paused at the family photo we'd taken last Christmas, me, Zeph, Talon, set upright in its frame. No marble, no gloss. Just three people who stayed. Morning brought a pale sky and the smell of the river. I pressed the wax seals onto the last two envelopes and stacked the evidence folder beside them. The invitations looked almost beautiful. Calligraphy curved over heavy paper, red stamps drying like small hearts. On the top card in the lower margin, I wrote the line Aurelia used to end her letters for Family for Truth. I knew they'd come. The word inheritance is a bell. People like my parents can't help answering. And when the lights rose on that room, there would be no performances left, only paper and time and 10 minutes to look at what they'd signed. The Riverfront Convention Center glittered like a jewelry box when we walked in, chandeliers throwing stars across the marble, jazz humming just below the chatter of 500 guests. Talon's hand found the small of my back as we crossed the foyer. At the far end, my parents were already performing Camille in white Chanel and Pearl's Reginald in midnight wool, shaking hands with reporters like the last 20 years were just a scheduling conflict. Zeph stepped out behind us in teal scrubs instead of a tux, and the room shifted, whispers flaring like matches. I leaned to him. You chose the right uniform. He nodded once and took the stage. Tonight, he said, voice steady in the hush, I want to talk about family, not the one you're born into, but the one that stays when you fall. The LED behind him lit with Aurelia's portrait and the words, family is a choice. Polite applause, then stillness, as Zeph told the story of a 16-year-old boy thrown out for getting someone pregnant. I felt the air turn toward table 1. Reginald's knuckles whitened around a flute. Camille's hand strangled her monogrammed handkerchief. If they gave my father 10 minutes to disappear, Zeph said, tonight I'm giving them 10 minutes to hear the truth. The screen flickered to Aurelia at her desk, scarf-knotted eyes bright. If you're here, Reginald and Camille, welcome. Listen for the clock. 10 minutes is very fast. The room went quiet enough to hear the cameras breathing. Talon climbed the stairs with the leather case. He didn't dramatize it. He simply laid the original relinquishment under the document camera and zoomed to the signatures. Relinquishment of all parental rights and responsibilities toward Daxon Rowe and any offspring born or unborn. He read then the clause 6 that chained their decision to every generation. The wake of it rolled through the hall. Reporters lifted their lenses in unison. That's fabricated, my father snapped, half rising. Talon didn't look at him. You validated this exact document 3 months ago when you forwarded it to Mr. Blake. The LED filled with emails, subject lines, dates the sentence about pressing the right buttons, the $500,000 retainer for a redemption performance. Owen stared at the tablecloth like it might swallow him. A murmur swelled outrage, recognition, the sound a room makes when a mask falls off at once. I stepped up beside my son and took the handheld mic. 20 years ago, they gave me 10 minutes to erase my name from their house, I said. Tonight I need 10 to remind them paper weighs more than blood. 2 uniformed officers and a process server came down the aisle as the house lights rose. The wall clock over the balcony ticked to 8:47. Start the count, I said. One of the officers handed over the emergency orders. No contact, no approach 500 feet. Camille broke first, tears finally spilling. We'll sue. Reginald barked, red blooming up his neck. Talon didn't even raise his voice. You just sued yourselves. Camera 7 swooped toward Table 1. A forest of phones tilted to catch the wreckage. The officers stepped aside to let them leave under their own power. 6 minutes, Talon said mildly, checking his watch. They shuffled past the donors who wouldn't meet their eyes, past the board members who suddenly had new priorities. At the doors, my father turned as if to say something that could unspool time, then saw his name on the papers again and kept walking. The room rose to its feet and clapped not because of punishment, but because light had finally reached every corner. When the doors sealed, Zeph faced me, his mouth a line that wasn't angry anymore. Now I understand the boundary, he said. Not for payback, I told him, lowering the mic for prevention. The stage lights warmed from white to amber and the screen changed to the crest of the Aurelia Montrose Foundation. Applause softened into attention as the program moved forward, not around the wreck, but through it. The news cycle did its work in the 3 weeks that followed. Roe Maritime stock drops 30% after family scandal crawled across every business channel. The board called an emergency session and escorted my father out of his own conference room by lunchtime. Camille stepped away from every committee that had once announced her name with trumpets. Online, a nickname stuck to them like rain to brick, the 10-minute parents. Another lower third ran beneath Owen's mugshot, facing federal probe tied to bankruptcy concealment. I didn't celebrate. I felt something settle in the world the way a shirt fits better once you clip the tag. A letter arrived from the Church of St. James on crisp stationery addressed to the Roes with a request to remove themselves from leadership for conflicts with stated values. Talon read it and gave me the ghost of a smile. Gravity, he said. It works. In court, the temporary orders became permanent. The judge's tone was academic, his language exact. The original, the chain of emails, Aurelia's video, the boardroom recording, each piece nested into the next until there was nowhere left to stand. They can appeal, Talon said as we walked out under a blue Savannah sky, but certified originals and a dead woman's clarity are a hard thing to argue with. We filed our last set of fees, and I signed the transfer of my remaining Montrose and Comer shares to the foundation. Ownership slid into mission exactly as Aurelia intended. Ground broke on the Aurelia Montrose Center on a bright Saturday with the river throwing coins of light against the pilings. 20 apartments for young parents. On-site childcare. A study hall with a ceiling painted in stars like the nursery where my son slept. Zeph spoke to the small crowd not like a prodigy, but like a man who had walked through weather. 17 years ago, he said, my father slept under an awning. Tonight and every night after this, someone else's child won't have to. I watched him and felt something in me I'd never had a word for loosen and lift. That evening, we ate on the back porch grilled fish. Zeph had seared perfectly a bottle of wine we'd been saving for no particular reason. The river breathed. Cicadas stitched a low hum through the dark. I took a thin silver ring from my pocket, old as my first ledger, simple as a promise. Aurelia told me to say what I want. I said to Talon, palms open. Do you want to stay officially? He laughed the way a man does when he's already home. I've been staying since the first time you said thank you. The ring slid into place like a key finding the right lock. Later, in the soft light of the living room, I lit a candle beneath Aurelia's portrait. You were right, I told her. Justice doesn't need a blade. It needs a switch. On the console, we had a new photo, me. Zeph and Talon, shoulders touching, eyes unguarded, the frame set upright as if it had always been that way. The old pen with my initials lay beside it, its scratches now a kind of shine. I thought of the 2 clocks that had measured my life, the grandfather clock that watched a boy step into rain and the ballroom clock that watched those who sent him out step away. 20 years apart, same hands moving one way. They gave me 10 minutes to disappear. I gave them 10 minutes to look at what they signed. Blood had failed me. Kindness hadn't. And the river, indifferent and faithful, kept running toward the only place it knows, forward where the light is. Some stories aren't about revenge, they're about reclaiming the right to exist. I lost everything in 10 minutes, but it took 20 years to understand that peace is the real victory. If my story touched something in you, if you've ever fought to be seen or built a life from the ruins someone left behind, stay with me. Leave a listening in the comments, share your story, and subscribe. Let's remind the world the ones who stay are the ones who make family real.